Welcome in, friends, to another episode of Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. I am Mike Mercado, as always, joined with Nicole Mancha. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Thank you so much for all the support and all the interaction you have given us with last week's episode. Before we get into this week's show, which is going to be a fun one, we're going to dive deep into moving in together and everything that comes with it. It's going to be a very fun topic to jump into. But before we get to that, Nicole, have you been? You got any last thoughts of last week's show about Halloween? Any final things that going through your brain over the last week before we recorded?
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. It's so nice to be back. I'm glad that we get to have another episode and talk to you guys about Halloween. I'm so happy that it happened. Halloween is my favorite holiday, so everybody dressed up. It was a really good time. Got to give some candy to some trick-or-treaters, which is great because, I didn't actually know that we did that in apartment buildings because I'm from the city and we don't do that in apartment buildings there. So, yeah, it was a great time.
You can follow us everywhere in the universe. She is at typingwhentipsy.wordpress.com. You can see all of Nicole's work right there. If you want to be interactive with the show, you can follow me on Twitter at mmercado2333. Do us a huge favor, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can listen to all our past episodes, all of our new shows and past shows on iTunes. Subscribe to us, rate us, like, review us, iTunes.com/Mercado Airwaves. Also on YouTube, youtube.com/MikeMercado2333. And all of our shows here are brought to you by our amazing producers over on Patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. There you can see how you can direct these shows and directly impact them like nobody else can. That's Patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. There you can see how you can sponsor us over at The Good Brothers here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike and all of our cool interviews that we have for you all. We have a great show. We have a lot to get to, Nicole, coming up here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. Stay tuned.
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, MikeMercado2333.
It's one of the biggest steps that you can take in any relationship at any point in your life. It's moving in with your significant other. It's something that everybody has to go through at some point in their life, no matter their sexual orientation, no matter their age. Once you get into adulthood, it ends up being one of the biggest moments in your life. And on today's show here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike, we're going to go ahead and dive deep into it. This is a subject matter that you were really excited to get into, Nicole. So why don't you give us your initial thoughts of this subject matter?
Sure. So I guess when it comes to moving in together, I like talking about it. I like talking to my friends about it, kind of seeing how everybody reacts to it because everybody reacts differently. There's a certain change that happens in any relationship when you move in with them, and it's that change of, is this going to work or is it not? Because you're moving in with somebody, you're learning so much about them in such a short amount of time. It's not like when you're dating. So I think it's something that everybody kind of likes to see that they're not the only ones who feel like that.
So is there a specific emotion that triggers or that interests you when it comes into a couple moving into with each other's? Like, is there something that you notice when you speak to your friends about it or when you think about your own relationship? Does something pop up for differences or stuff that you just didn't see happening or, something in those lines?
I think it's an excitement, but a nervousness as well, because you know that this is kind of going to make or break your relationship. Because if you two can't live together, where are you going? There is no end game then. So I think something when you initially talk to your friends about it, especially when you're in that phase of, I think I'm going to move in with this person, and what do you think? And I don't know, honestly, if guys do that, but girls do that. We check with all of our close girlfriends on our decision making before we do it. Like that joke that they have where when you send your text to all your friends first and then you send it to the boyfriend, that's 100% accurate. You check with all of your friends before and see what they think, even if you don't go with what they say. And it's, it's a good way to gauge a reaction from them. It's also good to kind of have that sounding board of what you're thinking is going to happen or what you want to happen, and having that reality check about it too.
For example, what type of reality checks did you not expect over your lifetime?
So, I mean, I've had roommates, and I've also lived with somebody before, and I think that really quickly I learned whether I was going to be living with that person ever again, or if it was going to work. My best friend and I have been friends for 20 some years. We moved in together, and after 6 months we were like, yep, we can't do this. We will never live together ever again. And that wasn't even, a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It's just relationships in general that, especially close-knit ones, you have those issues with. And I think when I moved in with somebody before, after a few months, I realized it wasn't going to work. You and I were very different, where we moved in very quickly. We moved in together about 3.5 months after we started dating. And even though I'm sure I have quirks that you can't stand, and I know that there are certain things that you do that drive me crazy, I don't think it was ever this is going to make or break our relationship. I knew that it would go in a better direction. I mean, I don't know how you felt about it, especially because you've essentially lived with all guys.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only time I've ever lived with somebody else, and you're absolutely right. It's a weird thing where you have to get used to somebody and all their annoying bullshit, but you get past a lot of it, and you just hope that you're not as annoying as their most annoying moments. So I find it interesting because to me it was this has been the only time that I've done that in my life, so I have a different perspective on it. Now let me ask you this: what are the negatives that seem to blare out the fastest when it comes into moving in with somebody?
The negatives of
just in general, when you're living with somebody, what negatives seem to be the biggest blares first off? What are some of the things that tend to come out first? Is it snoring? Is it somebody being dirty? Is it loud when they're in the bathroom? Or is it the television they watch?
Sure.
They have it too low, too high?
So I think the biggest thing that you and I argued about was the TV. The TV being on, the light being on. I like to sleep in pitch black darkness like the little vampire soul in me wants to. And you want something on. And I think that was a really big adjustment. And it's an adjustment I still don't necessarily, after almost 2 years, I have issues with. And that's why I have the remote to shut it off, because you're going to fall asleep 3 seconds later. But I think that was a pretty big one, especially with us. I think another thing was probably just how people's actions are in a regular day. Like, there are certain things that I expect to be done, whether it's a founded expectation or not. And I think I read an article the other day about how expectations kill relationships, because you can't expect someone to know what you're thinking. You shouldn't have set expectations, because everybody should be able to take a portion and really be able to speak about what they have issues with. And I think our communication levels became a lot better the further, we got into our relationship and the longer we lived together, because they weren't just going to go away. If something's bothering you, you need to say it.
Now, how does it change when you've been with somebody or you're living with somebody, whether it's a friend or in a relationship, the communication where you have to be able to speak with somebody and have open dialogue? Is that more difficult, in your opinion, when you're living with somebody compared to when you're not, because there isn't a shield in front of you anymore, or there's no safety net, or is it easier because there's nowhere to go? I mean, where do you fall when it comes to communication at that point in a relationship, whether it's from friendship or a partnership?
So I think that just in the beginning, when you're kind of getting to know somebody and learn something about them, it's really hard because you have the rose-colored glasses on. You want to see the best in them, even if it's not their best moment, because you're just so in love and you're so happy. I think as you go on, you need to start talking about those things. And I think for me, it's always been a little bit hard, because I like to make the person that I'm with feel special and loved and happy all the time. So there are definitely times when I won't say anything, even though something is bothering me. I think I've gotten a lot better about it over the years, just because I'm getting older and I've realized that I'm not going to settle for certain things. And I think that goes in any relationship that you're with, or that you're in.
do you have to have some form of self retrospective type of mentality in a relationship? Because the idea is somebody's living with you, so yeah, they have their quirks and they have their weird tendencies or whatnot, but how important is it to also be self-reflective and understand your your shortcomings and whatever, because the joke is always, you think it's bad, you have to work with me, imagine being stuck in my own mind. Like, you have to have that in a relationship as well, being on the other side of it.
Oh, for sure. I think that a lot of it is it's compromise, right? And everybody talks about it, everybody says it. It's also understanding who you are as a person. I think that I've talked to you about it, my friends. I know I'm an extremely selfish person by nature, and I work every day to make sure I do selfless acts because I want to make sure I'm a good person, right? So there are times when I want to do things for myself and maybe don't want to consider somebody else, but I really do actively try to remember that I want to do other things because I want to make those people happy too. So I think it's knowing yourself, accepting yourself. It's not about changing for somebody, it's changing for yourself. How are you going to make you a better person tomorrow? I always want to be better than the person I was yesterday, and I take that in every single aspect in my life, and I think that it's something people should keep in mind every day. You want to be better.
Should people use moving in with somebody as a tool to help develop them, or is it something that you don't rush no matter the age or the length of the relationship? Because like you just said, some people feel like having children's the way that you solidify yourself as an adult, or when you get married, that's the way you solidify yourself as an adult, but so on and so forth. Is it how responsible do you have to be when you're making this decision of moving in with somebody? I think we're a bad example to bring up, moving in 3 months with each other. So for anybody listening to that, I personally think you should take a deep look and make sure it's the right move you have to make. But in your opinion, like, how much thought process has to go into when you make a decision like that?
Sure, and you're right. We're not the best example. I think we were very lucky it worked out the way that it did. And I tell people that all the time, that we are very lucky it worked out the way that it did. Also that you are such a kind soul, because I also adopted a dog with him 6 months after we started living together. But I think it's really hard to put a time frame on it or a mentality on it, because I always think, like, there are people who get married at 19 and then have children and move in together right away, and they're happy for 50 years. There are people who wait until they're 35, they've been with someone for 5 years, they move in together, and they get divorced. It's really hard to put a time frame on there. I think it's better to look at your relationship and really decide, is this the direction that we're going? Do I see a future with this person? And is this something we need to develop with together and develop in together? Because there are times when one person feels that they should move in, the other one disagrees. And is that also something that's going to affect your relationship? Because it's one thing if you've been together for 6 months and the one person wants to move in and one person doesn't. It's another thing if you've been together for 5 years and one person does and one person doesn't. What trajectory are you trying to go on here?
Now, and if you go down the path of going and moving in together and starting some form of life with one another, and let's go more specifically with in a relationship, how do you keep away from boredom or the status quo or the same old, whether it's good or not? The idea of the same old is just the same old. How do you help people, or how do you get over a roadblock like that? Sure. Or at least are able to confront that head on?
I think part of it is like what you said, confronting it, realizing that you're in a rut, or realizing that you may not do as much together, or that level of intimacy has kind of dropped or fallen and you want it to kind of pick back up again. My parents have been together, it'll be 30 years in January, and they go on a weekly date night. And it's couples like that really I look up to, because that, they are relationship goals in and of its finest. But I think it's knowing what you like to do. I like going out to eat, but I'm also that person who would prefer to stay home and eat Chinese food. and watch television with you, maybe watching a movie together or binging a show together. To me, that's time that I like to spend with you. And when I don't get that time, I feel like a little bit distant, maybe, because I want to have that time that we have together. That's not necessarily us just in the same house, because I've said it before. It's you can be in the same location, doesn't mean you're in the same space.
Now, I think that's an interesting segue into what a lot of men tend to think, where it's living together, we're in the same realm, or we're in the same room, or we're under the same roof, we're in the same building, whatever the case may be. Men, and I'm willing to say men typically feel that's spending time together, where, again, in a general statement, women don't see that. Like, you know, if you're staying home playing a video game just because she's standing to the right of you doesn't mean that you're spending time with her. But where is that line of, you just said binge watching and spending time together, where is that line of spending quality time with one another and sitting next to each other just because that's what you're supposed to do?
So I think it's about knowing what's going to make the other person happy. You don't just binge watch a show that only one of you likes. Because to me, that's me saying, yes, I'll do this with you, but we're not necessarily doing something with me. And that's vice versa. I'm just saying as an example for the two, like just for this. I think that you need to identify something you both enjoy doing. Also, sometimes I think as the woman, you have to kind of push your guy in a direction that you want to go, because there are plenty of times they're like, no, it's okay, like I really don't want to, but once they're going out and doing something, it ends up being really enjoyable. One of my favorite places is the zoo, and I bugged you about it, and we went, and you ended up having a great time, and I ended up having a great time. But the same thing with baseball games. It's not necessarily something I want to do all the time, but I want to do something with you that we both can enjoy. And once we're there, we have a good time. So I think it's trying to identify things that you know you both will like, opposed to, hey, I'm playing a video game, how about you watch me? Yeah, you feel as if that's spending time together, but you're not making eye contact with me, you're not really talking to me, we're both looking at a screen, but you're being entertained and you're focused while I'm just sitting there watching. So I think it's a good balance you kind of have to create.
When we get back, we're going to touch into that concept of date night, how important is it when you move in with each other, whether or not it goes away when you do. We'll get into a little bit of the intimacy that goes into a relationship before and after that. And we got a couple more things that we got to get into here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. I'm Mike Mercado. She's Nicole Mancha. We got lots to get to, guys. Stay tuned.
What's up, friends? Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. If you missed any one of our past interviews with amazing guests like future Hall of Famer and pound for pound best fighter in the world, UFC flyweight champion Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson,
another day at the office, I get to go out there and test my skill.
to award-winning producer, director, and actor Orlando Jones,
Orlando, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, sir. I'm good, brother. How you doing?
and all the other interesting guests we've had on. Joining us today is director and writer David Ferrier.
Thanks so much, brother. I appreciate you having me on the show.
MMA legend Chael Sonnen joins us today. If you want to plug anything before you head out, please, it's all yours.
No, plug you. Keep listening to your show. This is great. Thanks, my friend.
Just subscribe to us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. And while you're there, please like, review, and rate us, friends. It helps so much. We also have a Patreon for anyone who would like to support the show. Just visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves and see how you could get all of our interviews ad-free and before anyone else, and how you could get your business or company spotlighted on the show. Follow us on Twitter at mmercado2333. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333. And if you would like to see what we're up to behind the scenes, follow us on Instagram, Mike Mercado2333. Thanks for listening and all the support.
So beyond just making time for each other, how important is it to maintain the same amount of consciousness of a date night, where it wasn't date night before you moved in with somebody, it's just we're going out that night, that's the night that we're hanging out. But when you move in with one another and you lose all, I wouldn't say you lose anything, but you lose the initiative of going to do it because, well, you see them every single day of your life. How important is it to keep that sentiment of date nights in a relationship during and post moving in with one another?
I think so. I guess for me, anyways, I think it's really important. And you're going to hear me say this a lot: is communication between you two. How important were they before? Because it's one thing to go grab a slice of pizza together. It's another thing to actually go sit down, have a conversation. I think that the reason I tend to believe that date nights are really important because it's a time where you don't have your phone on the table. You don't sit there and you're not watching television. You're actually talking and communicating with each other. And I feel like just in our society now, it's so hard to have that time where there isn't something that's distracting you. And I think that date nights, especially when you move in together for the first few months, I think you're very much in that honeymoon stage of, oh, I love to spend time with you. I remember when we started living together, I used to make you lunch all the time. And, all the little extra effort that you go through with another person to make sure that they're comfortable and they're happy. And I think once you really start living together and you're, 6 months in and you're like, oh, like, we really should spend more time together, taking those extra steps means you still are invested. And it's good to make sure that the other person feels that way as well. You never want someone to feel like they're giving more than the other person.
Now, how important is it to keep the intimacy in the relationship? I guess there's no proper word of saying it, but just, and it goes beyond just, by physicality, but the just the way, the way you interact with one each other and that intimacy of the closeness of the bondship. How important is it to maintain that when you move in with somebody?
I think it's super important. I think it's also really great to, I don't know if you've ever seen it, there's a book and articles about love languages and kind of how people perceive love. And I am definitely a person who needs physical interaction. And that's not it doesn't even have to be sexual. It's, hugs, kisses, holding my hand, putting your arm around me. I like that physical touch that makes me feel secure in our relationship. It makes me feel safe. And, it gives you that gives me intimacy. I've always thought with you've been more of I like to get you little things so that you know that I thought about you that day. And it doesn't have to be anything big, but I'll get you a soda or I'll get you, I got you the little R2D2 thing. And it's just this little knit crocheted thing. And, those little things I think remind you that I thought of you that day. And that to me is part of intimacy. It's part of knowing your partner, knowing what they need and responding to those needs. So I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. I think there's just a way where you need to learn what your partner wants from you and how to kind of make sure that you both are happy at the end of the day.
So then incorporating that type of intimacy when the years go on and on and on, where do you think the trick lies in to find that happy medium? Because it's not easy. The hardest part of a relationship is the fact that every single day it's the same thing. It's like Office Space. It's the same conversation you've had 1,000 times. It's the same text message you've had 1,000 times. It's the same breakfast you've had 1,000 times. It's the same holiday you've had 1,000 times. So how do you maintain the physically and emotional part of the intimacy? How do you believe people maintain that or let it grow with the relationship because of the monotonous that is being a human in a relationship and living with somebody?
I mean, everyone's, reaction is going to be different and everyone's answer is going to be different. For me, it's always kind of pushing out of the box. It's about taking a vacation. It's about spending 3 days being home with each other and finding things to do. It's about doing a podcast together, doing things that aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse sometimes, but it's in the other person's wheelhouse. And I think that it not only shows that you're trying to be a well-rounded human being, because I think that learning new things, experiencing new things all will create this kind of, the rounded person and personality, but it also shows the person that you're with and your partner that you're interested in what they're interested in and makes them want to do the same for you. It's about give and take. No one's ever going to be 50-50. That's just not realistic. but I think that you should be in the wheelhouse of 50-50.
So when you speak about 50-50 and making compromises, how important is it to give people space in a relationship, especially when you're living with somebody and you're on top of each other? Unless you win the lottery, most of us listening to this podcast who live with somebody else share everything together. There is no privacy. And mind you, the whole idea is not to have any privacy, but there is no privacy. The only me time you get is in your brain. So how important is it to allow the other person, and I guess this goes for whether you're rooming with your partner or with a best friend, to give people space, to allow them to feel like they're breathing and they're not being hounded on, or feeling like just that idea of like you're not living at home.
Right.
That you're living at your own home.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said, I've lived with roommates before, and the one nice thing is I always had my own room to go to and kind of separate myself. And even in my parents' house, I've always had my own room. I was the only girl that was living in the house anyways. My sister didn't come move in with us until I was older. It's important to know that you need to have your own space. I have never been a person who thinks that you need to be on top of people 24/7. I very much like my own space. There are times when you're at work and I'm, getting home and I have 3 hours. And it's great. I like to be able to just not worry about another person. And it's not that I don't love you and I don't want to be there with you, but it's everybody likes to have those moments where you're just by yourself. And, I love the dog too. There are days when everyone's gone and out of the house and I'm alone. And it's nice to just sit with your own thoughts and reflect. And it may not be anything important, but it's nice to have those moments. It's why I go for a run in the morning. I have 30 minutes that is just me. And it's especially because I do a lot of writing and creative writing and things like that. I need that creative part of my brain to be working. So for me, it's a decompress time.
So for a lot of guys in the relationship and when you're living with someone, one of the main concerns is finances. It's one of the main things that you learn when you get older, that it's the hardest part of life. You go back and the only thing you wish for is not to play with the old Pokemon cards. It's not to play with the old Super Nintendo. It's to not have to pay bills. When you move in with somebody, that becomes the forefront. That is the most important thing. Whether it's sharing money, sharing accounts, sharing money to buy gifts for Christmas, to buy groceries, to put gas in the cars, whatever the case may be. Finances seem to me to be the main reason why, besides infidelity, people get divorced. This is a nasty subject.
Yep.
People always spend too much more than you thought they did, or they're too cheap, or it just opens up a lot of doors that humans just don't like having conversations about, because it's uncomfortable. Just as uncomfortable as sex is money. I mean, it's in the same line. So when you're living with somebody, how important we've talked about open dialogue and intimacy and maintaining, a good momentum and rhythm with one another. But when you're bringing money into it and future, your future when it comes to whether you're paying back student loans or you're trying to buy a house in the future, you got car payments. Incorporating all that in the relationship on top of living with each other.
So I think that's something that everybody is uncomfortable about. I have not met a person who is comfortable talking about money unless they have money, right? I mean, none of us are, no one that I know anyways, is a millionaire that has all this money to pay for whatever. I think that money becomes a really awkward topic. And it's something that you need to push past and push through, because it's never going to be solved if you don't. I think that when when we moved from the city to the suburbs, a big thing was, is it going to be more expensive? How much are we willing to pay? Realistically, with our budgets, are we going to be able to afford it? And that's an uncomfortable topic. I mean, there are times where I've paid for something and I have not asked to get paid back because it's so uncomfortable. Why it's that uncomfortable when it has to do with your livelihood, I don't know. I think it's been made extremely taboo, which is why I'm starting to try and get past that. And I think your parents are a great example of that when they sit down and they do their books and they, pound it out. And I'm like, that to me, that's such a great example because they both know where their finances are. They both know where they're going. It's not so much of like the old school where, when my grandmother passed away, my grandpa had no idea where things were going, what was being paid and when it was being paid. And that's something I want to get away from because I never want that to be that situation, if we ever were in that position.
From talking about money, talking about intimacy, maintaining date nights, maintaining momentum, growing with one another. I'm very interested in this thought, in your mind process when it comes to this. How important is it to allow the other person that you're living with to maintain the little... we talked about the quirks and the annoyances, but that is essentially the individual. That is who they are. Whether you're with the partner or you're just living with the best friend, that annoying thing that may have annoyed the shit out of you all throughout the relationship or living with them was one of the things that endeared you to them to begin with. So how important is it to allow them to essentially allow the person you're living with to still be them, to allow them to still maintain their individualness while being part of a household?
I think it's really important to let people be them. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the Friends episode where Ross starts a pros and cons list for Rachel and his girlfriend Julie at the time. And everybody was like, oh, that's such a jerk thing. Everybody does it, right? Maybe not writing it out, but you always have these pros and cons in your head. Like, well, they may do this, but they don't do this. And I mean, that's way worse. So I think it's kind of keeping that in mind. There are things that you do that drive me crazy. Leaving 2 bites of the ice cream in the freezer. It drives me nuts. But I never have to worry about anything being done in the house. Like, if I'm not here, you are on it and you make sure of it that we, things are tidied up or whatever, and vice versa. I may not be good at that, but if you come home and I've been off, I try and make sure you have some food ready or whatever it may be. And I know that one of your biggest things with me is I am such a messy person. I cannot even explain over the radio how messy I am. It's awful. Like, people cringe when they see it, okay? But, I think that those quirks are what makes us unique. And at the end of the day, it's not hurting anybody. So why push them to not be that person? I think that there are certain quirks that, yes, you might want to address because it drives you nuts. Leaving the toilet seat up. I don't want to die at 3 a.m. Like, that's just not part of my agenda. Me leaving certain things out, and I know it drives people crazy. Like, I try not to do that. But for the most part, I think those quirks are what makes you a good person and vice versa. And no one's perfect. You can't ask for a perfect partner. You can only ask for a great partner who's willing to work with you and compromise.
Now, what about locations? I think that was one of the things that it always seems, unless you're with somebody that you met in the same neighborhood and you kind of just stay in the same thing, a lot of people meet people from different places all over the world. How is it, do you believe, like, to have that conversation, to make sure you're on the same page, to make sure there's no regrets of moving somewhere or wanting to move somewhere or planning on moving somewhere? Like, how important is it to really make sure you hone in on that the place where we're going to set our roots, or are we going to be gypsies and are we just going to not necessarily settle anywhere? Are we going to go different places? What if you guys aren't on the same page? How big is that?
I think it can be really big. I think it can be a make or break for some people. It depends on how long you've been with that person and kind of where you guys are, if you're open to looking. I think it also changes being city or suburbs. We're from a big city, or I'm from a big city. And, I feel like people are a little bit more open when they're from, say, the suburbs. And like, well, we're looking at 4 different suburbs, and maybe it wasn't the highest one, but it's still, like, in their comfort zone. I just got very lucky that you were willing to move to the city for the first almost 2 years. And then, we both felt that it was time to move to the suburbs. But in the very beginning, I was against it 100%. I was fighting it the whole way. And it wasn't until we kind of started talking about where we wanted our direction to go that I decided, you know what, you're right. We should at least experience it, because who knows if we'll be in Illinois in a year from now. We may move, who knows? It's just opening up all of our options, learning about different places, and kind of where we feel the most comfortable.
We've hit a lot of really cool subjects on this episode of Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. I'm going through the show list right now, and I'm sure there's stuff that we haven't hit on, and we got through a lot of stuff I really wanted to touch on today. Niki, I know a lot of this was on your mind the last few days. You really wanted to get out there, and I think this is really important. I think a lot of people need to just kind of hear that type of perspective. We're going to give our final thoughts in just a little bit. You can like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves and listen to all our previous episodes on iTunes. Please do us a huge favor, like, rate, review, share us. That's iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. We wrap things up next here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike right here on Mercado Airwaves.
If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, MikeMercado2333. Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
All right, Niki, before you say goodbye to the people, I kind of want to do this new thing for this show. I think it's really important in today's day and age that people take the time to listen to when other people are speaking. So more in touch with this, I'm going to do my best to allow this show to be Niki's show. And what I want to do is, the dialogue is always men don't listen. That we just in one ear, out the other. And I think that's actually a true statement for a lot of things in life. I think a lot of times we as men assume we know everything. Now, I'm going to get some crap for this, but I'm not a quote-unquote ally. I think a lot of these terms are kind of crazy when it comes to men and women. I think I go by common sense. And common sense tells you that if enough people are complaining about something, it's probably true. So women are complaining of it, saying, and we're not just talking about the sitcom stuff where it's like, my husband doesn't listen to me and misses the laundry basket. No. Obviously, people aren't listening. Whether it's a story about every single day women getting sexually harassed, to having to deal with conflict at work. So I feel this is Nicole's train, but this allows me to have an outlet to better my species because we're a little lower on the tonal pole. So on today's show, what Mike has learned is what I'm going to call this segment. What Mike has learned is how important communication is in the relationship. Dudes, it's really easy. Shut up for a few minutes and listen. She's not always going to be right. And look at, again, this isn't the sitcoms. You don't have to sit there and tell her, hey, you're right. The woman's always right. No. They're still a human. If your boy is sitting right next to you and he's telling you why he believes Carmelo Anthony is better than LeBron James, I bet you're going to listen a little bit more to him than when your lady's trying to tell you what might be better for your future. And it's easy. I get it. They're annoying. Guys, I get it. Girlfriends are annoying. I get it. Best friends are annoying. Roommates are annoying. But they want what's best for you. Otherwise, they wouldn't live with you. They wouldn't invest their time with you. So my suggestion is, if you've learned nothing else, just listen. And if not, get good at shutting up. Because it's really important. We have it pretty good, guys. We do. Don't feel bad for being a guy. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. Look at our dads. Look at our granddads. They're idiots. So don't feel bad. Just listen. And especially when it comes to intimate things like living with somebody. Life will be a lot easier, guys, if you came home to a happy home. So just do your best to not be a complete asshole. Nicole, any last thoughts?
I think that a lot of what you said is true. Listen to what they want. Sometimes, it's the little things, and I know that people say that all the time, but it truly, truly is. Getting your girl flowers or writing them a card. I am a sucker for cards. If I have a card when I come home, and it's just because I feel so good because it means that he took the time out of his day to remind me that he cares. And that to me is always the biggest thing in a relationship, is reminding the other person that you love them just as much as when you guys first started dating and you were still in that honeymoon phase. So listening is a big key to it. You know, if you've ever noticed, when you ask your girl what she wants to do for something and she gives you that look, it means it's because she's told you or hinted at you 75 times what she wants to do and you weren't listening the first time. It's not that hard. And it's not that you're a bad person, like Mike said. It's just realizing that sometimes instead of watching something or playing something or whatever it is, pay attention. And I feel like it benefits everybody. One person's not upset and the other person's not left in the dark.
You can follow Nicole at typingwhentipsy.wordpress.com. You can follow me on Twitter at mmercado2333. Be interactive with the show on Facebook, just like us. Facebook.com/Mercado Airwaves. Do us a huge favor, guys. Visit us on iTunes. Rate, review, like, and share us. It helps us a lot get up the charts. That's iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. You can see any one of our past episodes, any one of our new shows, like The Good Brothers, like episode 1 of Pizza Night with Niki and Mike, over on YouTube, youtube.com/Mike Mercado 2333. And every one of our shows here on Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by our amazing producers over at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. You can actually find any tier there that suits you guys, whether you want us to promote your business. If you want any of these episodes ad-free or before anybody else, just check us out at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. We have a tier just for you guys. It's Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. Niki, any last words for the people before we let them go on their week, before we see them next week?
Just thanks, guys, for listening. We really appreciate it. I would love to hear some of the topics that you guys want us to talk about. I'm willing to touch on anything, so let us know.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. For Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. We will see you next time here on Mercado Airwaves.
To be a part of the show, follow us on social media. Like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Follow us on Twitter.com at mmercado2333. And help the show out by liking, rating, sharing, and commenting on the show on iTunes/Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333. Check us out behind the scenes on Instagram, Mike Mercado2333.